comes from? What's the inspiration behind that?
Oh my gosh, there's so much embedded in that. I have to go back in time, but let's just go to 3 years ago when I retired from a very stressful but very rewarding full-time career, and I did this squirrel thing for about a year. Like, what do I do now? What do I do now? My kids were, young. I guess they were, yeah, all in their 20s by then. Started working part-time, teaching at the college, but there's still not always, what's my purpose? What's my why? And I started into this. So I thought, hey, this entrepreneurial world is really interesting. And wow, was I blown away. I had joined a group maybe 4 years ago called the Solopreneurs here in the county that I live in. I just met all these amazing people I didn't even know were out there. Like this network of people that are collaborating or doing their own thing, whether it's their own personal business, selling a product or a service or coaching or whatever it was, and really neat, amazing people all around me. I didn't even know they were there because I was in this, not a corporate world, but the tunnel of the job that I had at the time. So I just started building these networks, and it was just so cool. And I learned in a very, very short time, how come nobody knows about this person? How come I didn't know about this person? And so I thought, other than writing, publishing a book, what are other ways that people can share their voices? And came up, and so the podcast started. And if you go back 3 years ago to when it first started, it'd be quite entertaining. I didn't know what I was doing, the kind of same thing. And I took a course from Michelangelo Caruso, who is over in Michigan. He is an internationally recognized professional speaker. And then I thought, okay, I learned a lot from Michael. Absolutely. He's the one who challenged me to interview him. So my very first podcast interview is me interviewing Michelangelo Caruso on the spot. And it's very awkward, but I absolutely loved it. And then I decided I really wanted to not go out in the path of being a professional speaker, but give other people a voice. And then Taking the Helm came into fruition, helping other people not go through all the mistakes that I made when I published my first two books. And because there's different ways for people to have a voice, and there's so many platforms these days, through blogging, through radio, through TV, through, oh my gosh, it just goes on and on. So that's where it all came from. And it's been 3 years now. This is the third year of Taking the Helm. And every time I meet someone like you, Steve, who is on my podcast, I leave with this reflection. Okay, what is that person? What have they been through? And look where they are now. And if they can do that, then if one other person is going through the same thing that they went through, and that gives them the inspiration and the drive to take the first step. I mean, and you've spoken to many people as well, from alcoholics, from people who've been addicted in whatever way, shape, or form, who faced mental illness, physical crises, businesses. I had one woman her two IC in her business, so stole hundreds of thousands of dollars. So all of these things are crises. And yet the people on my show have all come out on the other side in a better place. And they actually look at it now as that happened for a reason, or I wouldn't be where I am today. And as a brain tumor survivor, that was my first book called Steering Through It. I got stopped dead in my tracks. And I say, I wish the universe had been kinder, but if I hadn't gotten stopped dead in my tracks, I probably wouldn't have retired. I would have still been on that treadmill. I would have become more ill, and I wouldn't have discovered this brand new world of people all around me who have incredible voices and stories and wisdom to share. That was very lengthy in answer to your question, but there's so many tentacles to it.
That is awesome. And I love it. And one of the things that I'm thinking about as you share that is that you had a career in education. And I mean, you were a teacher, you were a what is the word?
Superintendent.
Superintendent. There we go.
Yeah.
Of schools. I have a tendency to think in corporate terms, and I know the language in education is different than it is in corporate. Anyway, but you held some really prominent positions and positions with lots of responsibility. What was it that motivated you to get into the education world? Was it similar to doing what you're doing now?
I have to make an admission, we're talking from the heart, but when I was in university, way back then, I thought I was going to be a social worker or a probation officer. So my first year after the first year, actually, We went to visit a minimum security prison. I'm very close to the border between Ontario and Michigan. And when we came back, I said, nope, this is not for me. So I looked for another degree where the courses that I took would apply as electives or whatever. And I took an undergrad in psych. And at that point, I had 2 aunts who were teachers, and I started going to their classrooms to volunteer. And that's where I decided I wanted to be a teacher. I was never one of these people, got to do this. This is my lifelong passion. It just kind of happened. It just happened.
Sure.
And then I loved teaching, but right from my very first year of teaching, Mr. Coakley was the principal in my first up in Brantford, Ontario. Mr. Coakley. I remember the French word coquelicot. Anyway, sorry, I digress. I saw what he was doing as a principal, and I thought, that is so cool. I want to do that. And I've always been, so every year I would do another plan. What do I need? What's the next step? What's the next step? And then went into program department and special education and principal, vice principal, principal. I mean, and then, and then superintendent of education. And when I left the board, I just have to throw this in. Our senior table, 8 people around the table, had an equal number of men and an equal number of women. And that was something to really celebrate at that time. So,
wow, that's excellent.
Yeah. 10 years ago, my goodness.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
So lots of things have happened, kind of the journey through education of your own, through helping others through education, through giving yourself the voice, both through writing as well as through doing your podcast and so forth. I imagine that you have touched a lot of lives through the work that you've done, which I think is awesome. I am curious as to what started it all out. Was your first book remind me of the title again?
It's called Steering Through It. Yep.
Steering Through It, which was your experience of recovering from a brain tumor, correct?
Yeah. So that was that hard stop that I referred to just a short time ago was a real wake up call. And so when you talked about my motto, my mission of helping people make conscious decisions, what I hope happens is we don't wait for that brick to hit us in the head. We don't wait till the time when it, time stops and you think, am I going to be around for a day or a week or 6 months from now? I don't know. So, I mean, let's do that personal reflection now. If you've got signs, if you dread walking out the door in the morning, if you've got all of these pressures around you, and you talked about this so brilliantly when you were my guest, Steve, that we've got to pay attention to those signs as they're occurring. I had symptoms for 2 years. 2 years that I explained them away. I was turning 50. Oh, I had just started a new job. That was my first year as a superintendent. Anyway, long story short, after we were through all that, I mean, I had my craniotomy 3 weeks after diagnosis. I was on steroids. I had reactions to medications. I had a period of psychosis in my family. Thank God I had a family here who looked after me and a nurse practitioner who put me in my spot when I needed to, when I was in psychosis, doing some really bizarre things. I won't even go into it. It's all in the book if anybody's interested. But a year later, I had done journaling. I can't believe I almost forgot that. I journaled from the day I was diagnosed, and I've journaled for much of my life. And when I went back through those journals, a lot of it, I thought, oh my gosh, how many other people can we help? Because you hear the word craniotomy. What does that mean? What's that medication? You have no idea, not to mention the what ifs or what could be and all the different possibilities when you have something affecting your brain. Will I have memory? Will I have speech? Will I be able to walk again? Will I? So I took all those journal entries and broke them all down into what I thought would be meaningful for anyone else going through some type of a life crisis. And I shared it with one of my sisters. I went and joined her for coffee. And she said, well, Lynn, you have to put this out, but you're missing a whole other side of it. What are you talking about? She said, us. You have no idea. She didn't say us. There was all this other stuff happening that you don't mention in the book. I said, well, how am I supposed to know? You all were protecting me. I know you were protecting me, but I don't have any idea what you were doing back there. So I said, if you could write one thing, one day, one memory, would you do it? She said, give me a day. I think it was probably 3-4 days later she sent me, and I am so moved by this. She sent me, excuse me, this is my allergies. This is not emotions, but She sent me the write-up of the day she found out. And it ended up being a phone call. It wasn't my intention. And what she went through from the time she was speaking to me on the phone, when she hung up the phone, the emotion that she went through, she had to leave work, all of these kinds of things. I didn't know any of that happened. So she was bang on. So then I asked my children, my husband, my father, at the time was 78 years old and was in the waiting room for 9 hours, wondering if I was going to live. So I gave him a choice. So basically the book now includes, my daughter wrote from 3 specific periods of time. My brother, my 2 sisters, my father have all written. My boys and my husband said, we've lived through it. We're not going back there. So it became a story that I wanted to be cognizant of caregivers. And because when you go through something like that, or cancer, or some type of a life-threatening, or an accident where you're recovering, I hope you have someone there with you. And if you do, we need to acknowledge those people because they're going through a lot themselves, an awful lot themselves. And when you're in that, I've got to take care of myself mode, which is really hard to do as a mom. Well, when you're in psychosis, not so much because you're very self-involved at that point. I just really wanted to acknowledge the stories of other people going through something like that. And that's how that book came to fruition.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can relate to some of that in that, and I did not have a brain tumor, but I did have and do have mental health issues that I contend with. And, when I was given that diagnosis of bipolar going on almost 20 years ago, it was both a gift to have something that, a label is both a gift and a curse, to say, okay, well, this is how I identify, and this is why things are going on the way that they're going on inside me and my relationship to others and myself and all that. But it's also like, oh my gosh, how do I deal with that? Just like you were talking about with the craniotomy, which, by the way, is probably the first time I've ever heard that word. So
we also say craniversary. So every year that I call it my craniversary. That was new to me too. Yeah.
Wow.
You're right. You're so right, Steve, because it's not just, I mentioned physical, but I mean, there's a whole other realm of things, of signs that have to make you say, wait a minute, hold on. How am I going to, I don't like the word pivot. It's being overused too much, but you know what I mean? How am I going to stop and do a shift and figure this out? Because if you're in a bad place, like you were, like I was, it's not just about you. You're affecting everybody around you with that, wherever you are, in negativity or worry or concern or outbursts or whatever. So I think we have to think bigger than only ourselves and how we're impacting people around us.
Absolutely. And for me, one of the things that I had to come to the realization of was that I had been, you mentioned talking about how do we start paying attention to the signs in our lives that we need to address something that we, might be shoving to the back burner. One of the things that I got from my wake up call from the universe was that I couldn't keep focusing my attention out there, that I couldn't forget about the person sitting on this side of the screen, that I had to start meeting my needs, and not in a way that a lot of times there's a lot of discussion and kind of conflict between, is self-care selfish? And, possibly that there might be some selfishness to self-care, but I think self-care is also the most selfless thing that we can do. That when we take care of ourselves so that we can then be in service to others and to be the best person that we can be, I think that we make the world a better place. And too often, we push self-care to the selfish column rather than to the selfless column. And I think I am a firm believer that the world would be a much more brilliant and beautiful place if we engaged and celebrated the taking care of ourselves so that we can be our best selves, so that we can have the biggest and best influence that we can have in the world.
Oh, bang on. Absolutely. And I think I mean, part of me wishes, yeah, I don't know, I won't say it, but is it Gen Z, our new 20, are they Gen Z 20-year-olds or something like that? Man, are they teaching us, right? Look at the unemployment rate here is very, very low, but there's all everywhere you go, jobs to be filled because our Gen Zs are saying, nope, I'm going to do balance in my life. I'm not coming in driving 45 minutes for $15 an hour. I'm not doing it. So I think they're forcing us to be thinking this way much more frequently, or make it more common. And if COVID hasn't taught us anything, it's got to be about taking care of ourselves. My goodness, we lost people around us. We lost loved ones. We watched people become ill. We put a bubble around ourselves to protect ourselves and the people we love. And my goodness, self-care is, what's the old expression? The glass is half full or half empty. If I'm only able to give 25%, and I'll tell you, before my diagnosis of a brain tumor, I was lucky if I was giving everybody 10% as a mom with teenagers and blah, 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 blah. You're not serving anybody well. You're just not. So bump it up. And you know what? And what does that look like for someone who's all about serving other people 24/7? Maybe that first step is taking a bath for 20 minutes a day and putting on some music. Maybe it's going for a walk, but something. Dedicate every single day some time for yourself and whatever that looks like. And it might be for people with young children at 10 o'clock at night after they're in bed, or 9 o'clock at night after they're in bed. It might be getting up at 6 a.m. before everybody else to take your half hour of time, whatever that looks like. But once you get into a routine of enjoying something for you every single day, it's only going to serve you well. And then you'll need it, because it is serving you well. Maybe it's reading. Maybe it's, just sitting there on the porch and enjoying a cup of coffee and watching the nature all around you, whatever that might be. It's just so important. I'm so glad you explained it that way, Steve. Yeah.
Well, I think when we give of ourselves, when we allow ourselves to express, and I'm looking at the book that you have behind you, and I'm thinking about one of the books that you're currently working on right now. That is both an expression of yourself, giving voice to your story, your experience, and it is also, a voice that other people can receive. Can you tell us a little bit about the current book that you're working on?
Oh, I'm so excited, and I wish I had a copy of it. So it's a children's book series. It's called The Power of Thought, and it all has come about of. One of my children really suffered from a debilitating anxiety for a year and a half. She's doing brilliantly now, but that time came with so many lessons. And as an educator and seeing the number of students we had that were struggling with just, what we should all be able to do regularly without worrying about it. And my niece was graduating with a Master of Social Work, and I was out for a walk, and I had this idea. We need to be proactive. We need to stop waiting. And I give Jackie Simmons, look up Jackie Simmons, everyone. She's done a TEDx talk on how we can stop teen suicide. She's a brilliant lady. She was also on my show. What can we do to get to people before they're on that cliff or going over the cliff? And so I wanted to do, how do we get to kids? How do we get to these children in kindergarten and grade 1 who for the last 2 years have learned, don't touch anyone. Don't go near anyone. I can't hear my teacher because he is wearing a mask. How do we get to them to build emotional literacy skills, help them understand their emotions, but to be able to deal with them in a positive way and take that frustration and that anger and know a strategy to take them back to happiness. So our first book is about to launch, and we had 3 print proofs. One the illustrator has, one my niece has, and one, my sister was doing a book talk last night, and I gave her my print proof, but I'd be happy to show it. So, but what's awesome about this, so there's a series. It's going to be 10 books. The first one's about to launch on April 28th. It's called I Have Choices. And it's easy to say I have choices, but we created this amazing fictitious planet. We called it Tezra. I don't know. What does Tezra look like? I don't know. We created a game called Turbo. What does Turbo look like? I don't know, but we're going to have gender neutral beings so that anyone can identify with them. They're going to hover. They're not going to walk. And they glow in the color they're feeling. So Zerko, who's our main character, you got to check him out. It's absolutely amazing. In the first book comes out, and Zerko's about to play a game, and they start to glow in the color of orange. Oh, and the worry and frustration comes up. And then we have these adult figures who kind of hover on in, and help these characters, children, learn how to go from that emotion that's not so comfortable to a happy place, but very specific strategies. And then anyway, it was so much fun. So we're all online, and this illustrator, her name is Elisa Batten, and she's a brand new high school graduate, first year university. And I'll tell you, the creativity, this book, we could never have imagined the fictitious, that planet that we created with all this fun stuff that links emotional literacy and teaches it in a fun way. And I want to add in, Steve, I think you're with me. We didn't talk about our emotions and our feelings growing up. It was suck it up, buttercup. That's, and many generations after us. And we're now learning that if we can talk about it openly and understand it and then know how to take ourselves from here to there, what our triggers are, we're in a much better place in life. We have self-confidence, self-regulation, and the research, and we've done a literature review that's on my website, will tell us that we're going to be more socially able to get through life in a better way. So yeah, the first book's coming out. The second book is being illustrated. The third book is about to be edited. And we hope within 2 years, all 10 books are out. So it's really exciting. Yeah. I wish I had it to show you, because it's just so much fun. We've had so much fun.
That is awesome. And I love, one, the world that you're creating and the characters you're creating through that series. And I also love just the fact that, that through children's books, you're giving access not only to the children, but also one of the things that I'm learning through the church services that I've been attending, almost every time at the church service that I attend, they share an illustrated book while they're during the sermon. And there's so much wisdom in those children's books. There are these somewhat complicated or controversial or challenging concepts illustrated and written in a very accessible and beautifully expressed way, that it makes things that like emotions, that you and I were raised in a culture, in a time when those things were not talked about. In fact, they were shunned. And don't bring your emotions to work, don't bring your emotions to school. And if you have emotions, go deal with them, go see the principal, and they'll spank it out of you or have you write it out of you or whatever. But we don't want those emotions here. And what I'm hearing now is that, well, let's actually deal with those emotions. And I know for myself, I suppressed and repressed my emotions for decades until it became so toxic for me that I had to do something about it. And now on the other side,
that's what happens in the guests that you're having, Steve, the guests that I've had, it becomes a traumatic experience, some of them. Or if you've had a specific traumatic experience and you can't talk about it, you can't discuss it because that's never been taught to you, it's not intrinsic in you, then we bury all of that stuff and it becomes illness in some way, shape, or form. I don't, if anyone wants to dispute that, oh my goodness, even there's research, but there's so much anecdotal evidence from people who've experienced it, like you have, like I have. I became ill for a reason. I know that. And I don't know if it was suppressed emotions or the treadmill that I was on and my body just said, enough is enough. You need to stop, whatever it was. Right. But yeah, if we can talk about it openly, I think right from childhood, just imagine how much healthier and happier, and empathy comes with that too. Oh boy, are we missing? Do we need empathy in this world right now? Do we need empathetic people? Absolutely. If we teach emotional literacy to children and they develop that empathy, we're hoping, because of the way we portray our characters in the book, that we're teaching children to recognize when someone is sitting over there all by themselves and feeling lonely or feeling scared or afraid or angry, and be able to help them through that experience. That's developing empathy, right?
Absolutely.
And there are lots of books that teach emotion, but you're not going to find another book that's on an imaginary planet that really anybody can relate to. In my words, if you've written it, I'd love to see it, and I'll show it. I'll help you share it, because we've got to get the word out in the world.
Absolutely. And there is no, too often we think about competition and, that if someone's done it, then I can't do it. Well, even if 10 or 100 people wrote books on dealing with your emotions for the same audience, one, yay, because that means that there are more resources from which to draw. But the second thing is that 100 different books on the same subject are told by 100 different people, and each one of those people has a different voice. We benefit because there are more people doing the same thing or similar thing to what we're doing. The voice and the culture becomes stronger because that voice becomes more prominent. And one of the things that I think that would make a huge difference in the world is if more of us, and the culture shifted from suppressing your emotions to expressing your emotions in a helpful way, that would solve so many problems.
I think so too. And I'm about to start something on my own website where if you've written a children's book or a children's book series that is specific to this, I'm creating a platform where I'm going to share your books with your links for purchasing, because the more the merrier. If you want to look up Trish Tonai, everyone, collaboration without competition is her motto. And boy, have I learned a lot from her. So it isn't about buy my book because it's the best book. I do think it's very unique. But we want to teach children at a very young age. So if there are 100 other books out there, I'll try to get them onto a page so that people can go to one place and find books about emotional literacy. I know we can go to Amazon and do the search, but I really want to help independent indie authors, raise their visibility and
well, there's something special about that. One, I mean, Amazon is trying to sell books, and it doesn't really have the culture or the environment. And I'm grateful for Amazon, and I benefit from my relationship with Amazon on at least a daily basis. And yet it is not the same as going downtown and going to the local bookseller, or going to your website and, pulling up where you've listed all the other books that are related to what you're doing. Amazon has a great structure, but it does not create the individual experience that the local bookseller or the individual solopreneur whose heart is in this, and this is what your mission is. Amazon has its own mission, its own purpose, but we as individuals have at least as important of a message. And I'm grateful that Amazon helps us amplify and empower our messages, but we need to be able to express and to give voice to our own mission.
Absolutely. I wanted to mention libraries, but I won't, because I'll go off on a tangent. There's a political statement that was made here in Ontario that's making me very angry. We'll let that go for now. Boy, oh boy. Yeah, we have to create those spots. And and if you're an independent author, about consignment, where you take your books to all your local bookstores, all your local libraries. They'll make an agreement with you for 20 or 30% of the sale, but your books are there on the shelves, right? They're there. You can do book readings and book signings in your local establishments. And you can even create events in restaurants or whatever you want to do in your own community to create, like you just said, that what's the word? That time, that place that is so magical, as opposed to order from Amazon and have a download or delivery the next day.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's so important too. And one of the things that I'm learning to step into is, as a newly published author, how do I get my work out into the world more completely? How do I take advantage of those, the restaurants, the bookshops, the libraries, which I'm also extremely grateful for.
Yes.
I have been a fan and an avid and eager visitor of libraries for as long as I can remember. Fortunately, that was something that was common and celebrated as I went through the school system, and having parents who both adored books and really fostered that within me as I was getting older.
And if you live in Canada, and I'm just going to say that for indie authors, because I don't think a lot of you knew about this. I sure didn't for the first few years. You can apply. I'm blanking on the name. It'll come to me shortly. You can actually apply so that anytime your book is taken out of a library, every January, we get a check.
Really?
So they track it. Absolutely. So getting your book in local libraries throughout, all across Canada is really important. And there's a process, and it is time consuming. We have, oh my gosh, I can't remember how many libraries in Ontario. I was blown away just in Ontario alone. And it's about writing to the person who does the acquisition and giving them a link to purchase the book, or donating in your local area, whatever you want. I will think of the name. I will think of the name before we're done, or at least I'll give it to you and you can put it in the podcast notes, because I'm blanking right now.
Yeah. Well, I think that's awesome to have, collectively the government supporting and honoring the local voices because
I'm not sure this is a government organization. I'm going to give you the information. I still have an acquired brain injury, and sometimes, I don't even know if that is that or age. The name just isn't here right now.
Believe me, I totally understand.
I could Google it. Let's keep going.
Sure. One of the things we talked about before we got on the air today was that, that we're all human. We all have our human foibles, have our challenges. And I think we can, again, suppress that just like we do with our emotions and other things. Those are difficult things, and they don't put us in our best light. But we all deal with those things. We all have those memory gaps where we can't remember the right word or the right name or whatever. And we can suppress that, or we can express that so that others can know that they're not alone, that we're all human, we're all trying. And even one of the beautiful things I find beautiful about that is that even with the challenges that we dealing with mental health issues, dealing with a brain tumor and the ramifications of that, is that you are still out there creating podcasts and books and making such a huge difference in your community, both locally and globally. We don't have to let our challenges be the stumbling blocks that keep us from moving forward. They can be the means by which we amplify and share more fully who we are.
Absolutely. I'll just share, mindset is so important. We were planning on launching this first book in December for Christmas. Well, it's going to be April 28th. And there was a time not too long ago where, I'm sorry, there's a plan and I'm sticking to my plan, which causes us so much stress. Okay. So we had a problem here. We need to wait for this. My uploaded Ingram Spark didn't work. I have to wait for the ebook proof. Okay, so what? And I have to say, kudos to my niece, Amber Raymond, who's my co-author. She rolled with it and she's a social worker. So she knows these kinds of things, right? This is what she practices. But if she hadn't, the friction that would have caused, because we weren't meeting deadlines for a whole bunch of different reasons, would have really, so you know what? Okay, it's coming out 4 months later. It's going to make a difference. It's going to be impactful, but it's going to be the best that it could have possibly have been, because then we had to take a step back after advanced reader feedback, which is really important. And they had some great suggestions for us. So I guess part of being human is sometimes we just got to give ourselves the permission to say, that's okay. Push it back a couple of weeks. Oh, I can't make the meeting today. I feel ill. Yeah, you're allowed to feel ill. You're allowed to, I feel down. I'm not myself today. I'm going to push that meeting back. It's okay.
Absolutely. And I think that's awesome. One of the things that reminds me of is my youngest child has been home from school yesterday and today, and it has more to do with dealing with anxiety and kind of the stresses of school. And there was a time when I would do the same thing, you've got to be at school 100% of the time, and, it was all about performance and making the grade and so forth, and totally discounting things like anxiety or depression or, illness or whatever. But honestly, even we can respond and focus in on making the grade, or we can recognize that we're human, that we do have challenges. And my hope is, what I'm living into, is that by honoring my child's needs right now, that they will have the confidence and the trust to listen to those signals from the universe, that they'll be able to respond to them better as they get older.
Oh, I absolutely. The difference that we can make with our children and the future generations. I don't do the shoulda, coulda, woulda, but part of why I'm so passionate about doing this now is if I'd had those tools when my children were young, I don't know, would it have made a difference all those years later with the level of anxiety that my daughter felt? I don't know. I think my illness contributed to that. There were some physical issues with asthma and all kinds of things that contributed to that. But if we can be proactive, and so if your child's home right now, Steve, as you said, what can we help these individuals learn so that they're better equipped to face anxiety, to face fear, to face whatever it is as they move forward in life? And it could be reading a book. It could be taking a day off. It could be coming home for lunch. It could be going on a field trip. It could be we're pulling them out of school for a day and we're going away for a weekend early. And my goodness, I will say the one thing I wish, oh, it's so huge. I talked about it with our kindergartners, but it's all of our students, right? The last 2 years. Emotional literacy in Ontario, there was a whole, when everybody came back, that was the key. It wasn't about instruction. It wasn't about figuring out where everybody was with their reading and their writing, their math. It was seeing where people were with their mental health and trying to bridge the gaps. The needs are amazing. I have to say, just heard on CBC radio yesterday that the phone calls to Kids Helpline are starting to drop. And that says something. But I wish there'd been a bridge curriculum, because you can't be doing online in, all of online for 2 years and think there isn't some type of a bridge curriculum to help close that gap, especially with kindergartens, grade 1s and grade 2s who are learning to read, who are learning the basics of math, who are learning all of those initial social skills. So, I mean, we can go back again and say, I wish, but I don't know an educator who isn't cognizant of this is a time of reteaching, of rebuilding the social connections and all of those kinds of things. And if there is someone out there who's going all academic, shame on you. I'm just saying it. Shame on you. You're doing yourself a disservice, and you're doing those students a disservice too.
Wow. Thank you for bringing all that you bring to that conversation, because, you've been in the trenches. You both as a parent, as an educator, as a superintendent. I think what you just shared was much needed and much appreciated.
Then the external pressures are still there though, right, Steve? If you're in grade 12, got to have those marks to get into post-secondary, right? I mean, there's a way that you can balance that when you get up into the senior grades in secondary, but it's tricky right now for everyone. I teach a post-secondary, and I can tell you the number of students that we have with mental health challenges is very large. It is. I mean, these students, when you think about it, they're coming into post-secondary for the first year, and they really never attended school full time until the end of grade 10. Grade 11 and 12 was right. Grade 11 and 12 was a mismatch of no extracurricular, none of this, none of that. Whoa. Right. Yeah. So that first year in college and post-secondary this year too it's been huge. It's been big. And the college I teach in has done an amazing job at knowing that was going to happen and putting things in place for support. So boy, we could go on and on, couldn't we?
We could. And I thank you for bringing that up. I think one of the takeaways from today's episode is just the idea of how do we bridge the gap between, kind of what we expected and the status quo to the way things really are, and to give ourselves grace and compassion and freedom to be able to deal with what we're dealing with right now, whether it's brain tumor or mental health illness or, a broken leg or whatever. Recognize that there are challenges that we face in life, and that there is still hope that tomorrow can be even better than yesterday or today, that life can continue to evolve and improve in a beautiful way for us individually, as well as for those people around us, and hopefully the world at large.
Yeah. And let's everybody take a first step, whatever that first step looks like. I'll tell a quick little story. After my craniotomy, I didn't know if I was going to wake up with memory, speech, and all of those kinds of things. I couldn't even push myself up on the bed when I was in ICU. And 2 days later, I was kicking the nurse out while I had a shower by myself and had the buzzer in my hand. And so you think of when I first came home, I could walk to the end of the driveway and back. After a few weeks, I was walking around the block. And you think a simple little thing like being able to push yourself up in the bed or kicking the nurse out of the shower is, oh, jeepers, that's what I accomplished today. But when you look back after a very short period of time or longer, if that's what you need, every single one of those little baby steps adds up to you being in a better place for yourself, for the people you love, and everyone around you. So baby steps. Don't say, I want to be here in a year. What am I going to do now to get there? You're not getting there that quickly. It's the baby steps that add up, and you celebrate every single one. And you know what? Write them down. Journal. I did this today. I did that today. I did this today. I did that today. And look back at it in 6 months, like I did when I was done my journaling. Wow.
That's awesome. And I am such a huge fan of journaling too, because, you know, it gives us access to those types of moments. You know, if we don't record it, we run the risk of losing it and not being able to recall it. So kudos to you.
True. Very true.
So as we wrap up, I have a couple of questions for you. One, I always like to ask my guests, what is your heart calling you to do today?
You know, my heart. It's kind of interesting because the first thing I think, I just can't wait to get this children's book in the world, but it's not about the book. It's about the difference that Amber and I and Elisa, our illustrator, not hope, we know is going to make a difference. And then being able to keep that going and teaching the different strategies. My heart is saying this is really important. And it's gotta be a focus right now. So honestly, because of my passion for this, I haven't stopped it, but I've put aside consulting for new authors. I'm certainly here to help people when they need help. And I've put aside, as I said a while ago, professional speaking. I'm focusing on my podcast and getting the voices of people out there and helping with people's emotional well-being for the future.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I love both the passion and the desire, the intention behind the book series. I also really applaud your recognition that with putting all that energy into that there are other things that need to take a step back from.
Yeah.
You know,
well, and the other one, which was a really hard one, is I've gone to bi-weekly on my podcast instead of every single week. That was a tough one, but I also have a son who's getting married this summer. We have a wedding shower coming up. We're traveling because he's on the East Coast. So, I mean, all of those things are part of life, and they're wonderful, wonderful celebratory things. And I don't want the pressure of I gotta. I want to be in the moment, in those times, and be able to celebrate them furiously and focused and present. So that was a tough one. I just had to add that in, going bi-weekly. That was a tough one. Maybe in the fall I'll be able to go back to weekly, but it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. And that's beautiful that one, you recognize that need, two, that you honored it, and three, that you hold on the possibility, the hope of, you know, that's where it is right now, and it doesn't have to stay that way.
That's right. Yep.
So that's beautiful. My last question for you is how does our audience reach out and connect with you?
Oh, just go to lynnmclaughlin.com. Everything is there. I'm pretty proud of myself. Over the last few weeks, I've actually taught myself the background workings of Squarespace by just following I do have a brilliant webpage person I can call on at any point in time, but everything's there. The books, the podcast, the blog, it's all in one place. Just lynnmclaughlin.com. And there's a place to, you can email me at lynn@lynnmclaughlin.com if you want to come direct, or go through the Squarespace immediate connection as well. I don't have texting enabled, Steve, and that's another intentional thing. Well, I mean, part of the reason is the scammers that are out there, and I don't answer telephone calls from phone numbers that I don't know anymore. So to get to me directly really is through the email or through the website, and then I'll know you're real.
I'm totally with you. Thank you so much, Lynn, for being a hero of the heart and being on the podcast today. You are making a world of difference.
And thank you for making it so easy as a host with the questions that you asked, Steve. I think we align quite nicely. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Beautiful. And for our listening audience, Until our stories meet again, be the bright light in someone's dark night. I'll talk.